Hello, this is Christian Okoye, former Kansas City Chiefs. You are listening to Grilling Truth.
Welcome to the Best Available Draft Podcast on the Gruely True Sports Network. The Best Available Draft Podcast is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my co-host, Matt Minich. How you doing, Matt?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, and tonight we're going to talk about defensive backs, corners, safeties. We're going to start off with corners tonight, but before we do that, all right, I know you coached at the collegiate level. What's the first thing you look at when you evaluate a cornerback?
I think there's a lot of things to look at with the corner position, but the biggest thing that stands out, especially in the NFL, is can he play man coverage? Because the NFL is so much about matchups and so much about being able to do things in man coverage that having guys that can, having multiple guys that can do that is huge. And that's what people don't get sometimes when you're yelling at the TV and complaining because people are catching balls underneath that they should be playing man coverage. It's not about just having a couple of guys that can do it. You got to be able to match up with five guys on the field. So you can never have too many guys that can play man coverage really well.
So when you're looking at a corner, what's the most important thing to you height and speed-wise? I mean, does it matter to height and speed or –
I don't particularly care about the height. I mean, to be honest with you, to an extent, it's a detriment. You don't see a lot of guys that are over 6 foot that can really flip their hips and run. I mean, and one of the things I really like to see in a defensive back, but especially somebody who's going to be playing press coverage, somebody who's going to be playing on the outside. I like to see them be able to do, in action movies when they'll be driving the car, 80 miles per hour backwards, and all of a sudden they'll flip it around and be going forward, and going fast right away. I mean, that's what you really want in a corner. You want a guy that can be lightning fast in his back pedal and then flip his hips and not miss a beat in that and be going even faster. So to an extent, height can be a detriment in that. You don't want a guy who's tiny. DJ Reed's one guy that's in this draft who's at like 5'9". That's going to be a bit of a struggle. But anything over that, you're getting 5'10", 5'11". That's not going to be much of a problem. The guys that are over 6 foot, that are 6'2", 6'3", yeah, they're going to match up well. With Sanu and Julio and some of these bigger guys out there, but it does cost them a little bit in how they can change direction and how flexible they are in their hips.
Yeah, and I would say the reason for that is, for some reason, people have pigeonholed corners into the 5'10", 6 foot range, and when you get above that, they tend to switch guys in college, even move them to safety or even an outside linebacker.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely the case, and I mean, in my coaching career, I was always the guy that's 6'3" can run and flip his hips was always my white whale. Like I was just searching for that guy, but generally had more success with the guys that were 5'9", 5'10", because they could just do that a little better. And those guys that were a little taller, I was guilty of that myself. That I would see those guys and say, hey, they can't move their hips quite as well as some of these other guys. We're going to be really fast at linebacker. Put some of those guys at linebacker.
See, I'll tell you what I did. The last 5 or 6 years I coached was arena football, and defensively, I would find the biggest DBs I could find because nobody else ever wanted them. And I had a dude that was 6'3", 238, played at East Carolina. And the thing about it is the field's a little bit smaller, so we'd play a lot of cover 4 and just let them catch the ball in front of us all day and just smack the snot out of them. And we'd end up causing a lot of turnovers. Especially when you put
that's
a
true.
wall
That's true with the smaller field. Yeah.
Yeah.
With the smaller field, having those guys that can go up and jump, the jump ball becomes a bigger thing on defense than it is on offense, even, I think.
Well, and I think when I look at that, it brings me all this for just this one thing, and that would be Denzel Ward. Denzel Ward's a guy that I know a lot of people love. I know you love him, I think, if I've read correctly. And I like him a lot. But the thing that worried me about him is I'm actually one of the few Indiana football fans. And when they played Semi Cobbs Jr. earlier in the season, he was beaten for a touchdown and some other big receptions by Cobb because Ward basically had problems with his size. Now, I think from watching him, he was good at preventing separation. But just watching that game against Cobbs, who's no fucking Julio Jones, sorry about the language, but he's no Julio Jones, and he had problems with Cobbs. So what would you say there to make me not worry so much about that?
It's definitely a concern. And I look at that game, and I think that's a really important game. Anybody that's thinking about Denzel Ward needs to break down every play of that game and see exactly what went on in it. A few things to consider. Number one, that was his first game being the guy. He was starting alongside Marshawn Lattimore the previous year, but Lattimore was the guy. Lattimore was the guy they were going to put on the top guy that they were going to lock down with. And he was going to be covering the number two guy with Connolly in the slot, and he didn't have to be the guy. So that puts a lot of pressure on him. Not a good matchup there. Cobbs is going to be a good receiver. He's got some skill to him.
He's a guy that's
probably not great speed, but
he's probably a guy that's going to be a number 3 guy in the NFL, though.
Yes, absolutely. And when we're talking about a potential top 10 pick, getting torched by a probable day 3 pick, that's a pretty big red flag. I'm absolutely with you on that. Just saying, give him his due. He does run some very nuanced routes, and he gets some things. With that game, Cobbs outplayed him, and it wasn't just size. He did some really smart things. He knew how to get separation. One thing that people don't always think about with separation, everybody, and when I coach defensive backs, they're always worried about getting beat deep. And obviously you don't want to get beat deep, but being beat laterally is a problem too, because that allows them to catch the ball. And in that game, Cobbs was able to give himself room to the side to catch balls. He was able to keep Denzel, when he's running a fade route, keep Denzel in, give him plenty of room on the sideline in order to adjust and catch balls in there. And that was a major problem that he had. In addition to just being beat on fade balls in the end zone because he was much bigger. That is something that Ward improved upon. He came out against Oklahoma and did much better on it. He started leaning on fade routes. And what I mean by that is when the receiver gets an outside release, the number one receiver gets an outside release and you're playing man coverage, you really got to want to put your shoulder on him and basically force him to run away from you and cut down that area on the sideline. It makes it so the quarterback has to throw a perfect ball and the receiver doesn't have room to adjust the
sideline as an
ball.
Extra defender.
Exactly. That's exactly what it does. So he didn't do that at all against Cobbs, and Cobbs made him pay for it. But it is something that he started to demonstrate a little bit later in the year. He did a lot better against Oklahoma with that. So He can develop some nuance for sure, but he's got great feet. His feet are always moving, and even if his body is not, his feet are going, and they're going lightning fast. Doesn't use his hands very much in press coverage, which is a bit odd. So he needs to learn how to do that more. But he's so good with his feet and he's so patient with it and has such good speed that he's not getting torched deep. He can run with just about anybody in there. So the size is definitely a concern. But I think really in the NFL, you should have a bigger corner and you should have a smaller corner. I think when you look at those guys who are, 6'1", 6'2", they're not going to be very good matched up against Antonio Brown, just like a Denzel Ward isn't going to be very good matched up against a Julio Jones. So I think you want to have that balance, and I think the defensive coordinator that takes him needs to understand who he is and needs to play him, properly, against the right kind of guys and give him the right kind of matchups.
See, that's kind of my question, because I've seen a lot of people in mock drafts put him in the top half of the first round. And I think if you're top half of the first round, you've got to have a shutdown corner there. I don't think there's a shutdown corner in this draft that I've seen. Now, I do think that Ward is worth a first-round pick. I just think if you're picking him in the top half of the draft, I think that's kind of a reach.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why you'd say that because he is going to struggle with some of those guys with size. And he'll fight and he'll grind in there, but they're definitely going to give him problems. But I think we get caught up on matchups on offense. We're always talking about, hey, they got to go out and get a tight end who's 6'5" and can streak down the field because the defense won't be able to match up against him. You got to think the same way on defense too. You got to use your matchups, and you got to understand that shorter corners are going to be a little bit quicker, a little bit shiftier. They're going to be a little bit better against your Edelmans, your Antonio Browns, some of those guys. Whereas, you're going to want the bigger guys. You're going to want your Stephon Gilmores. You're going to want, bigger, more physical corners to match up against A.J. Green and Julio Jones.
All right, now, this is the guy I would take over him, and I know you're going to disagree with me, but I like Josh Jackson. I know he looked like crap in the combine or not as good as people thought, but when I watched the film, I think he might be one of the most intelligent, disciplined defenders out there. And, I mean, he's a great ball hawk. It seems like he's where he needs to be. He's very seldom out of position. And I think they're both going to be really good players. But I think if I'm going to pick a guy high right now, I would go with somebody who I think is completely ready. I don't think Jackson needs as much work as Ward. I think they're both going to be tremendous players. But I just like Jackson a little bit better. I also like the fact that he has a little bit more length and athleticism. He's 6 foot, almost 200 pounds. I know he's slower than Ward, but the instincts, I think, more than makes up for that.
I think you're absolutely right. He's got really good instincts. He's a pretty smooth runner for a bigger guy. Does his best work and spent most of his time in zone coverage. He's going to do best, I think, with teams that are going to run a lot of cover 3, put him in deep field zones, and let him sit back there and make plays and jump on balls. So I definitely think he's got a fit in the NFL. I think he's like Ward. I think he's likely a first round and potentially a top half of the first round kind of guy. But I think corner is a really difficult position, maybe the most difficult position to predict where guys are going to get drafted.
Oh, no doubt.
So much of it comes down.
And it's the hardest position to play, I think, too, outside of quarterback.
Yeah, and so much of draft position comes down to what the fit for the team is. So I think Josh Jackson, I think he's a great fit for like a Seattle, where they're one deep, playing some cover 1, playing some cover 3 team. I think he can develop some of those man skills, and they like those guys to be bigger and longer. The NFL is obsessed with the big and long corner, which definitely could push Denzel and Jair down a little bit. But they're going to do well in that system. Denzel hasn't played a lot of, not to get back on him too much. He hasn't played much in zone because Ohio State lived in man and lived in press man with him. He's got the physical tools, but it is a bit of a projection with him. So I think it really comes down to what scheme you're running. I think both of these guys could be real successful in the NFL, though. And, I definitely think Jackson has the ability to be a really good, deep third type corner in the NFL.
That brings us to Mike Hughes, Central Florida, part of the reason they were undefeated last year. Another great ball hawk. I know there are some off-field concerns with him, and that's why some teams have him graded as a third-round pick. Some have him at the end of the first. I think most have him somewhere in the second. I think he's a natural cover corner with great feet, agility, very fluid guy. I think this, though. I think when you look at him, I think, and I know why he's coming out, because corner is not real deep in this draft, so he's going to be picked higher probably than what he should. But I think this is a guy, if he'd have stayed another year at Central Florida, we might have been talking about the top half of the first round next year for him.
No, you don't know what's going to happen in Central Florida, with the coaching change. But, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think he's a smaller guy, too. Maybe he gets lost in the shuffle a little bit with Denzel and Jair in the class. But very smooth runner. Like you said, fluid athlete. He can break. and he's done well in zone and man coverage. You know, they run multiple looks down there, so definitely plays well. And I think he's got a really good understanding of the game too. He does some of the finer things, like leaning on fades that I talked about before. Now, that's one thing that stands out to me. You know, when you know how to adjust to specific routes and how to play on specific routes, you know, it shows guys that have been well coached, and you know, and those guys are going to be able to transition well to the NFL because they know how to do that, and they're not just running around out there like some guys are. So, yeah, I definitely think he's got the speed and you know, the brains to be very successful as a corner in the NFL, and he can do multiple things. So I think he you know, I think he goes probably towards the end of the first round. I think like the Patriots could be a real good fit for him because they're looking for that smaller corner, the guy to put on the other side there. Not sure if McCourty or Jason McCourty is really what they you know, want long term on that side of the ball.
All right, then we got Carlton Davis from Auburn. He's 6'1", 206, and I think we get to 6'1", as you said. And when you watch him and you watch the film, I don't think he's got the greatest hips. I think he's really limited in his movement skills. He does have nice technique when he jams receivers. He uses his length to cover well. I think he has a lot of potential with the right coaching, but the movement skills to me, especially against deep speed receivers, could give him some major problems in the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. You know, he plays well. He uses his physical tools to his advantage. You know, and you see some guys that don't do that. They don't realize they're big guys, but he does, and you know, he gets good jams. He is able to throw guys off routes. He runs smooth, but he doesn't transition smooth. You know, so that's when you're dealing with more agile, shiftier receivers, that's definitely going to be a problem for him. But he's definitely you know, a very, very long player and a real fluid athlete who can do well in both zone and man coverage, but going to want to be kept away from certain matchups. All
right, then we got Dante Jackson from LSU. He's a guy that everything I've read has a ton of discipline issues. He is a good player. I think Kevin Tolliver was supposed to be the better LSU corner last year, but I think Jackson had a solid season, extremely fast. I think he'd be a good corner to line up, as you talked about, against the small, speedy receivers, and I think he does have a future. The discipline issues are what have to give me cause for pause.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a real good athlete. You know, one of the faster guys out there, real smooth runner, definitely matches up well against the smaller guys. I also think he's physically, you know, he lives in press. You know, he loves to play press, loves to get up there, and I think he could be an excellent nickel. I think he fits really good into that role, and I mean, a nickel's really a starting corner in the NFL these days with all the substitution packages they're using. So I think he could, if somebody's willing to kind of look past some of the discipline issues, I think he could slip up and surprise some people, and you know, maybe even towards the end of the first round. But you know, definitely on the second day of the draft, you know, I think he could go in and make a impact right away as a nickel corner for somebody.
Yeah, then we got Jair Alexander from Louisville. This is a guy I think would have been a first-round pick without all the durability concerns. He's a fast, athletic corner that can run the route, prevent separation. But because of the injury red flag, I think he might be pushed into the second day. What's your take on Alexander?
I mean, to me, Alexander's right up there with Ward in terms of what he can do physically. I think he's an excellent man coverage player. You know, real smooth athlete, can transition real well. He's physical in coverage. It's, you know, for when you see a smaller guy, it's good that they can also be physical. And he's played, you know, a good amount of zone as well. You know, he had a really good season in 2016. And had a ton of picks that year. But yeah, he was hampered by injury this year. He just wasn't quite the same guy. So he's definitely an important one to get all the medicals cleared from, and you know, make sure you're you know, doing your due diligence there. but he could be a steal. You know, if he's gonna slip, he could definitely be a steal. You know, he screams to me Bengals draft pick, because regardless of how many corners they have, they like drafting corners, and they don't mind drafting guys who are going to be injured for their entire first year.
Well,
so
for most of their career,
he's a great
sometimes.
fit.
Yeah, he can hang out with Tyler
Yeah,
Eifert and Whirlpool or whatever they do now.
hey, it worked out for William Jackson anyway. So
yeah, and William Jackson's going to be a stud, I think, as long as they keep him healthy.
Oh yeah.
All right, is there anybody that we didn't talk about that you may want to mention? I'll tell you one guy to me that stands out just from watching film. I know there's a ton of off-field concerns with him, and that's J.C. Jackson from Maryland. What's your take on him?
Yeah, you know, I think he's got some skills going for him in you know, both man and zone coverage. Definitely shows some good ball skills. I'm not blown away by him though. You know, he's not somebody that stands out as one of the top guys to me.
Well, no, if he was, we'd already brought him up, Matt.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. But yeah, I mean, I think he can definitely find a fit.
All right, you got anybody else, cornerback-wise, you'd want to talk about?
Yeah, you know, one guy, this is a real deep one, you know, so you want to talk about not one of the top guys, but Devon Davis from Texas San Antonio. Everybody's talking about Marcus Davenport from Texas San Antonio, you know, for good reason. The guy's a freak athlete, you know, definitely has, you know, some the ability, the chance to develop into something special. But Devon Davis is an excellent corner down there. Does everything you're looking for, placing you know, good man coverage, some good has had success in zone as well. You know, he's got the confidence, he's got the swagger. It's tough to tell though. You know, he's playing at Texas San Antonio, so you haven't seen him against some of the top competition. But he's a guy that has all the physical tools that you really look for in a corner, and could definitely be a steal for somebody. Probably you know, a day 3 steal for somebody. So that's one guy kind of deeper down the list to watch out for.
Yeah, my only question with him was I think he plays a little tight in the hips.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's relatively smooth. You know, like I said, the big thing for me is seeing what he's going to be doing against better competition, how he can match up. But yeah, I mean, I didn't see too much of that. I thought he was pretty smooth in transition.
All right, let's switch over to safety, which I think is the best DB in this draft, which is Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think he could play safety. I think he could play corner if he had to. I think he could play nickel corner over slot receivers. He could cover tight ends and man. He could be the deep free safety center fielder who protects the deep part of the field. I think he can do just about everything, and I think this is the best DB in the draft.
Yeah, he's got some great position versatility there, and also scheme versatility that you can do a lot of different things with him. And for, you know, creative defensive coordinators and guys who are looking to be very multiple on defense, that's a big piece, a guy you can move around and do a lot of things with. You know, maybe you start him off in his first year and you know, you try and keep it simple and you only do a couple things, but definitely a guy you can build on and move all around your defense. Guy never stops moving. I mean, he runs down plays that you wouldn't think he could run down, going clear to the other side of the field. Reads the quarterback well. You know, and he really, he seems like he's in charge of the defense. You know, he seems like he's back there, he's taking control. You know, so for teams looking for that safety, that guy that can be the leader back there, that can get the secondary lined up, you know, I think he's a great fit for that.
All right, the next guy who I think is interesting is Derwin James, 6'3", 211. And when I look at him, I think he has to be a strong safety, you know, the tough 8-box and a defender in the box. I don't think he could play deep center field. I think he has some coverage limitations as a free safety, but he hits people. When you watch him, he hits people. And I always think that, you know, if I'm coaching the defense, if you give me 11 guys that'll just knock the snot out of somebody, I don't really care what else they can do. I think the kid can play. And the thing that wouldn't surprise me would see him adding some weight and grow into being a will linebacker in the future either.
Yeah, he's interesting because he's a bit of a throwback. You know, he's your true old school, John Lynch, strong safety, rolled down in the box and really playing in the box. And that guy, he didn't really exist in the NFL anymore. I mean, you still see the cover three teams. They're going to have the guy roll down a lot, but it's going to be tough for him to find a place and find a really good fit.
But don't you think that
tackler.
With somebody with that ability, I don't think there's that many guys with that kind of ability anymore, and I think that's kind of why the NFL went away from it. I think if he gets a defensive coordinator that knows what the hell he's doing, I think you can do a lot of things with him defensively that people don't see anymore. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah, it's just going to take somebody that's a little creative and can open up the playbook from the 90s. John Gruden's trying to do, and go back to that old type of player. But yeah, he's a great tackler. Real smart. He's big. So he looks a little stiff. So it's not just the speed aspect in the deep field. It's the stiffness that concerns me. That if you look to project him as like a nickel kind of guy, he can do that, and he can actually absolutely play the run from that aspect. But in terms of like matchups, he's going to match up much better on your big slot receivers and your tight ends than he is on your little slot receivers. Your Edelmans and guys like that. So like with a lot of people, it's about keeping him in the right situation and getting good matchups for him. But I think physically he can do a lot of things, and he is. Not quite the movable piece that Minka is, but he's a piece that you can do some special things with if you've got a coordinator with a brain that can figure out how to make the most of him.
Yeah, so he won't be coming to Cincinnati, hopefully. Next up, we've got Ronnie Harrison, who I think is a little similar to Derwin James. Tough run defender. He has good athletic skills to cover, but he has issues dealing with receivers in man coverage. Basically at Alabama, he was the guy that was the enforcer. Minka Fitzpatrick was the coverage safety for the Tide. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of Harrison's.
Yeah, I think he's got some athletic ability. He's shown some range to him. He's not really a man guy, but I think he can be a cover one safety or cover three safety. I think he's got the range to run around back there. Shows some good ball skills as well. So he's definitely got some things going for him. I don't see him as a top guy, but I think he's a day two guy that with the right fit could make a contribution early.
All right, a guy I think is better than both of those guys we just talked about is Justin Reed from Stanford. I think to me, when you look at him compared to the other two, this guy has been coached really well. And, I mean, he looks like an NFL player to me. I know when you watch his film at the end of the year, it doesn't look that great. But I really like Justin Reed. What's your take on him?
Yeah, he takes real good angles when he's breaking on routes. Plays well, both in the box and up high. Got some good ball skills as well. And he can play a little bit of man. I don't think he's I think he's better in the box, but he didn't have the physical tools to live down there. He's a 6'1", 200-pound guy, so he's a little slight to be that physical guy in the NFL. So he's really got to prove that he has the range to really succeed in coverage. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think he's really well coached, and I think he's going to have have a good fit in the NFL. If he can get into the right system. But I think he's a little bit limited athletically, which will keep him away from being a major deep field player.
All right, next up we got Terrell Edmonds from Virginia Tech. He doesn't get near as much draft buzz as Tremaine Edmonds, but I think this is a kid that has some potential. He has good size at 6 foot, 217, decent coverage skills. What's your take on Edmonds?
Yeah, 6 foot 217, and he's the little guy in the family. But no, I mean, I think he shows some real good ability, and I think he kind of gets lost in the shuffle because you almost like you come across him and you just think it's his brother because their names are too similar. Yeah, I mean, you know, he's shown some skill and he's definitely a rangy guy that can fly around in the defensive backfield. You know, you see him around the ball, but you don't see him always making, you know, being the guy who's making the play. You know, so I wonder if he's, you know, got the alpha mentality to, you know, to really be a top end guy in the league. But yeah, I think he's got some tools, and I think he projects well, and he's got a little bit more athletically than some of the other guys in the class. Who I think this is a class with a lot of guys that are better in the box. Unfortunately, it's a league that's looking for more guys who have the range to play in the deep field.
Yeah, to tell you the truth, when I look at the safeties, I see one in Fitzpatrick that I'm sure is going to be good. Then I see 3 or 4 guys that might be, and then I don't see a lot after that. I see guys with potential, but let's face it, everybody in this draft has potential, or they wouldn't be there.
Yeah, it's a weird class, and I mean there aren't a lot of real free safeties and guys with great range. You know, in there. And I mean, I think you even see a guy like Ohio State's Damon Webb, who's not a great athlete, but he's been well coached and played in a good system and had a couple of years of experience. And you look at him, and if you're looking for a free safety, you're like, well, we could do worse than that guy. You know, but there's not a ton of great options for that. One guy we didn't talk about though, who I think might be the best fit as a free safety is Wake Forest.
Jesse Bates. That was the next guy I was going to bring up. But go ahead.
No,
because I really like him, and I don't
know
why they've got him. Like everything I've seen projects him as like a 3rd or 4th round pick. And I mean, he ran well at the 40. He looked good at the combine, which doesn't mean much. And when I look at him, I think that he is one of the few guys here that could play that position fairly successfully right away.
Yeah, I mean, he's fast. He can flip his hips. He can move. You know, he gets great reads in coverage. You know, and reacts, you know, really fast. Makes great plays on the ball. Not a great tackler, but again, you know, they're looking for more of the rangy guy. You know, and he's got to learn how to make open field tackles a little better. But NFL safeties don't need to be the guy that's up on the line of scrimmage making plays in the run game all the time anymore. You know, they need to be the guys on the back end making plays.
Right.
You know, I think he can take some risks at time, but he's got a lot more going for him physically than most of this class does.
All right. Any other safeties you want to bring up?
You know, one guy that sticks out to me, who's kind of similar to Derwin James. So if you like Derwin James and what he can do, but you don't get him, Quinn Blanding from Virginia is an interesting guy for me. You know, again, kind of more of that old school strong safety. He does not have the athleticism to be a cover 2 safety. You know, but he was extremely productive. I believe he was a 4-year starter for them, and played great against the run. You know, and dominated inside the box. You know, can play a little bit of coverage underneath, but plays great against the run and great in the box. He's a 6'2", 215 guy. Again, maybe more like a big outside, or excuse me, more like an undersized outside linebacker than anything. You know, I don't think he's going to be, you know, somebody that's going to blow the doors off anything. But again, if you kind of like what Derwin James brings to the table, but you're not going to be in position to get him, I think Quinn Blanding is a guy that you can get some similar things out of.
All right. And next week we're going to have 2 shows. Well, go ahead. Did you have somebody else?
Yeah, I got one more guy. So I wanted to mention Blanding, but one more guy is a little bit deeper is Saron Neal out of Jacksonville State. Saron Neal is the Division I AA or FCS, whatever they call it nowadays. He is the FCS Minka Fitzpatrick. And by no means am I saying he's as good as Minka Fitzpatrick.
You're just saying at that level, he has the impact Minka Fitzpatrick does.
Yes, and he's a guy that they could play in the outside corner, they could play in the inside corner, they could play at safety. He can do a lot of things, and he's fast, and he's a really physical hitter. You know, and good size, he's like a 6'1" guy. So, yeah, I think he's another guy that you can get in there and he can be a big-time piece that you can move around your defense, do a lot of things with. Maybe can contribute right away as a sub package guy, as a nickel dime type corner. But I think has the ability to do a lot of things within defense, and he's going to slip. He's going to slip because he's from a smaller school. But I think he's a guy you can get on day 3. I can get some great value out of on special teams and on defense.
Yeah, and I think he can play safety or corner while helping on special teams.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm glad you brought him up. I forgot about him. All right, next week we will have 2 shows on Thursday and Friday to cover our last 2 positions, which we will be back next Thursday at 6 o'clock Eastern. That sound good with you, Matt?
That works for me.
And we will discuss wide receivers. And then Friday, we'll give you a time on that Thursday. We'll be talking about linebackers, correct? That's the other position we're missing?
That's it. Yep.
Also,
and we're in the draft week.
Yeah. And then, of course, we will have our live draft show, which will start a half hour before the draft on that Thursday night. Make sure you join us live on thegruelingtruth.net or on Spreaker. You can download our app on iTunes Radio. You can hear all of our shows on iHeart, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Matt Minich, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.